Scott here on Flip That Script. Today I wanted to talk about, I guess, what you could call the awakening process. A lot of times we need to awaken to the emotional abuse of our family members. What I mean by that is kind of coming to the realization, coming out of denial, stop minimizing or excusing their behavior, and start connecting the dots. A lot of us, like myself, don't really fully awaken to and begin to acknowledge the emotional abuse of family members and call it what it is until later in life. Fortunately, I believe a lot of younger people are awakening to it earlier because there's so much information on the internet. There's really been a proliferation of books on the topic in recent years, and just the whole term of people being toxic or having toxic family members has become kind of more common knowledge, even if you're in denial about it. I'd certainly heard of people being toxic, but didn't really want to acknowledge that my father and brother were toxic and abusive. I guess until I was ready. People really want and crave for their family members to just be at least decent and respectful, if not kind, loving, positive, encouraging, and supportive. My real awakening process happened about 2.5 years ago or so. And like for a lot of people, when you go through some kind of a personal crisis, your toxic, narcissistic, abusive family members' true colors will really shine. If you want to say shine, but you can very glaringly see the lack of empathy. And when you're in a time of need, they are not really there for you. For me, it happened, or the whole process of really fully awakening to these pervasive abusive patterns and starting to acknowledge and call it what it is, happened because in the summer of 2017, my wife, Harleen, of 23 years, who had also been my business partner for 20 years, collapsed and died suddenly of cardiac arrest. It was a very shocking and traumatic experience because there had been no known heart condition. So this was one of those very traumatic, out of the blue, life-changing experiences. What I can tell you is that their response to this in my time of need really made me start to see what they're all about. My father, his main agenda, very early on, we happened to also be upside down on our mortgage at the time. It's just a reflection of when we had bought our house in 2008. His main agenda was to make sure that I didn't short sell the house. Which really is the best thing that somebody in that situation should do. Um, in the early days when I would call him, he would ask why I seemed so upset lately and was always crying whenever I called him. And we're talking just a few months out, and even a few weeks out from this devastating experience. My brother began triangulating and lying to him about what was going on, saying that I wasn't going out, and I continued to go out like once a week with friends. I'm into karaoke, and I was out going to karaoke once a week. I kept that routine. I teach piano. He said that I was no longer going to see my students. Not true. I never even skipped a single lesson during this difficult time. My wife and I headed up a whole music school and employed other people as independent contractors. That's what we had been doing together for 20 years. He lied to him and said that I no longer had anybody working for him. The other possibility, of course, is that my father was triangulating and saying that my brother was saying these things, and maybe he wasn't. Either way, not good, highly manipulative, and abusive at an already difficult time. Early on, also, when my father and I were speaking once, and he was asking why I had not collected the life insurance yet, and why the autopsy reports weren't in yet, he very casually and cruelly said, my wife's name is Harleen. I think I mentioned that. Oh, I thought Harleen was already all chopped up. And then he started to make a sound effect of what it must sound like when they start up the machine to put somebody's body through the crematorium. Just unbelievable. Both of them began to try to pressure me to join dating sites and begin dating. Just within the first few months. I think it was the one that first Christmas, about 4 months out, that my brother drove us both down to our father's house, which is about an hour away, and basically interrogated me and lectured me all the way down regarding finding another woman, giving me no space for my grief and devastation, and just speaking with an air of authority and as if he should tell me what to do and when. It would have even been my prerogative to stay single the rest of my life. When we were down at the house, when I started to get emotional, they both started to give me a hard time and told me to start to get over it. When my stepmom came over to hug me and comfort me at a time like this, they started telling her not to baby me. This was my prerogative, but I didn't date for 2 years. When I did, an acquaintance of mine named Kathy, serendipity kind of brought us together, and we got married in the summer of 2022. At one point, when my brother continued to berate me with texts, also kept trying to interrogate me in terms of my son that Harleen and I had adopted when he was a baby, who was 18 at the time of Harlene's passing. He was having a hard time with college. Understandably, he started the day after his mother's memorial service. He decided that college wasn't for him after a year or so, and decided he was going to find employment. My brother would not stop with these long, critical texts asking me how many jobs he was applying for, what all he was doing, and it wasn't really in a kind and supportive way. It was in a very condescending, controlling kind of a tone. He wanted proof of how many places he applied and just all kinds of, it's like I was on trial. At one point, about a year and a half after my wife's passing, he took me to a barber shop and told me, and basically engaged in emotional blackmail, and said, you need to cut your hair short and shave. And he had the barber do all that, and said that I was never going to find a woman that was interested in me if I wore my hair long as I do, or longish, and had facial hair, which is utter nonsense. My father agreed with this. But the horrible thing is, he said, I'm never going to talk to you again until you do this. My son is a light marijuana smoker. They also berated me about his pot smoking. My son tested in high school and earned 26 credits. This is when he was a light pot smoker, which he still is. I don't judge that. He earned 26 college credits because he passed what's called the CompTIA A+ certification program test. There was an average of 30 students taking a computer course at his high school, and over a 15-year period, he's the only student that ever passed that. Did they acknowledge or congratulate him about that? No. Just berated me about his pot smoking, his job search. He was in the middle of driver's ed when his mother died, getting on me about that while I was going through everything that I was going through regarding business changes, grieving, being concerned about him, and them ramping up their abuse. Around the time that I started dating Kathy, right around that time, I had the opportunity to write an autobiographical business article about my many years in business, the changes I was going through because of Harlene's passing, and included in the article about her and I being together. We're now happily married. We got engaged in Valentine's Day of 2020, which was shortly before I went no contact with my family. I'd sent the magazine article. I was on the cover of the magazine. It's a very elite kind of publication geared towards the high-earning, well-educated Jewish population in my area. They printed it as written, about a 1,500-word article. So I write very well. Of course, that's never acknowledged either. My father called the article From Zero to Hero, Back to Zero Again. That's all he had to say about it. Because I decided to simplify my business since my business partner had died. and to go back to it being just me. Um, my business, I think I didn't mention, is that I teach piano. I was going to students' homes. I've since converted to mostly remote, even post-COVID. And my wife and I, for 20 years, were employing dozens of other people. We're seeing upwards of 200 and 300 weekly students. It's a lot to manage. To lose a business partner, apart from a spouse, is in and of itself a very devastating and life-changing experience when that person's been your business partner for 20 years. So then never acknowledge the levels of success that we had had before, but just that I was downsizing. I guess that was being a real loser. When Kathy and I became engaged, I called to let my father know, and he basically just gave a very perfunctory congratulations, said, "Scott, that's what I was telling you needed to do, was to find another woman." And then he hopped off the phone very quickly, just saying that he really wanted to get back to his show. All this kind of behavior, definitely emotionally abusive. I think it takes us a while to really, sometimes a very long time, to awaken to it, because it's pretty painful to realize that your own family can actually be one of your biggest enemies. Let's just tell it like it is. It's true. They're against me. They want to undermine me. This is what toxic abusive family does. That's why they're called toxic. They're actually bad for your mental health. They are like against you. The people that are supposed to be your biggest allies end up actually being your biggest enemies. It's a very sad thing, but at some point you just have to say enough is enough. And part of what they get off on is even arguing about it and wanting you to explain yourself and say what's wrong with what they do and all that. It's all actually just part of their game. But what I can tell you is that because you want to protect yourself from the pain and what a harsh reality it really is, it's absolutely normal and acceptable and understandable to not acknowledge it, or to be in denial, or to minimize it, or not see the forest for the trees for a long, long time. And that's really what happened with me. But what happened between the time that my wife passed away and lots of other things I'll get into later, that's what really awakened me to the harsh reality and the truth that they're emotionally abusive. And that's when I started Googling around and discovering that they very much, in my estimation, would be diagnosable with narcissistic personality disorder, definitely very high on the spectrum. And you, as a listener, if you've experienced emotional abuse from your family, be kind to yourself over the fact that you didn't want to see this, or that you thought that you could change. Also, you don't really have any other experience, at least with family, to compare it to. So what I've heard said is that it's kind of like a fish doesn't know it's in water because that's just its natural environment, and it wouldn't really know what water is until it's out of water, not in the water. So you're kind of immersed and in the family dynamic that you've always been in. Fortunately, I'm happy that younger people are learning about this and making, sometimes difficult decisions regarding toxic and abusive family members because of the internet, which first became dial-up when I was about 30, and then it seems like in recent years, the whole idea of toxic relationships has become much more common knowledge. There's a lot more education about it out there. Um, and there's also been, besides YouTube channels, a proliferation of lots of books on the topic. Oprah talks about it. Dr. Phil, Steve Harvey, Ricky Smiley in the Baltimore area. There's like a lot more information out there. Um, so I feel like when I had an awakening process and once I really started putting the dots together and coming out of denial about this, it's like I can't unsee it. And I think that some of the things I experienced, only a little bit of what I went into here, um, made it that no contact was the best decision for me. It's a very saddening thing. You'll grieve what you actually never really had, but it's also very freeing to stand up for yourself and build a life, or in my case, I feel like I already had very much of a life, but um, to have a way of life that just no longer includes relationships with them. So I'm going to be sharing even more details, but some of these details about when I was going through a time of very difficult time of loss, trauma, and transition um, is really, like I said, what awakened me to the fact that I needed to do something as extreme as what I decided to do. It's now been a little over 2.5 years since I've gone no contact, and honestly, my only regret with my decision, apart from the fact that it sucks to have family like that, relatives that call themselves family, my only real regret, and this is what a lot of people report that have to go no contact or feel they need to protect their peace and their own well-being. Honestly, my only regret is that I didn't do it a long, long time ago. So there's quite a fair amount of personal sharing that I did, and I look forward to doing more of it, and then starting to also include talking to you about measures that you can take even if you're not going to go the full no contact route.